Thank you. So, without further ado, there we go. Just a bit about me. I'm Jo McGrath. I'm from Sector 3. Just a little bit about Sector 3, where we are Stockport's local infrastructure organisation, and we were set up for the sector and by the sector to offer support and guidance to Stockport's thriving VCSE sector. You can follow us on Twitter at Sector3 SK, and we've now got a website which is work in progress, so please bear with us, but it's got some information on there. And you can also sign up. We do a weekly bulletin which gives information on funding opportunities and other opportunities to collaborate with one another and events. I've also in my team got the support of Simone Callahan. She's working on community development, and Helena Banfield, who's looking at our marketing and communications. The presentation will be available to you after this event, so I'll send out the slides, okay? Additional support in Stockport for funding and support around your organisation is available as well from Stockport Council, Thad Barker, and Stockport Local Fund Manager. He's great at helping navigate the funding labyrinth, and he's very good at supporting people with bids, etc. And so is Mark Rogers from Stockport Homes, so there's some contact details there should you need them. Right, now, welcome Kaylin and Georgie. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Jo, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I am Kaylin. I am the funder manager in the Great Manchester team, for the National Lottery Community Fund. Georgie's also joined us. I'll let Georgie introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgie, and I, like you probably know, cover Stockport and Tameside in the Great Manchester team.
So yeah, Georgie's one of our funding officers. So she's helping distribute the Coronavirus Community Support, which is our new fund, which has been going for about a month, which is a collaboration between us and us and government. So I'll go through a few things. I'll generally try and skip through a lot of it. There's a lot of the stuff which is already on the website, and obviously I think the Q&A is one of the most important bits. So we'll try and get through quite quickly. Just the normal sort of warnings about the fact that I live with other people and they will potentially at some point join unintendedly. So yeah, apologies for that if that does happen. So yeah, we're going to go through what we want to fund, who we can fund, and how to apply. So we can move to the next slide now. So yes, the Coronavirus Community Support Fund is a joint response to distribute both government and national lottery emergency funding. It was launched on the 22nd of May. The whole pot of funding is around £200 million. It's obviously, the time limit hasn't been set yet. It's just open at the moment, but it will close at some point. Once the funding is gone, it will be gone. We will provide some sort of deadlines about when things are going to close, but at the moment it is open. But if you do need funding, I would recommend coming in for funding because we don't know how long it will last for right now. We can fund activities supporting people and communities affected by COVID-19. So that's sort of project activity and delivery stuff, but also I think a really important thing which we can support you with is organisations who are experiencing acute financial difficulties as a result of the pandemic. So we know a lot of organisations have been struggling, whose income has massively been cut because of the crisis. And so yeah, we have been using a lot of reserves potentially and are under threat of closure in some cases. So we are here to support that, specifically that as well. The funding is up to £100,000. We can go above that if there's an organisation who potentially is working across multiple areas, and that seems more appropriate, but generally the majority of funding will be up to £100,000. The funding needs to be spent in 6 months funding. It's sort of emergency funding through us and the government, so yeah, 6 months. Just so you're aware, the funding will, once this funding is gone, we will be having national lottery funding, which will continue, which will look more at the sort of rebuild or recovery. There's a lot of work going on about that at the moment, but we haven't got any sort of clear announcements on that. But once we do it will be there sort of on the website and publicised. Just to say before we go to the next slide, just that we are already heavily oversubscribed, so it is really busy, but we still want to encourage applications because we want organisations are struggling and need support. I think in Stockport in particular, it's not quite as high, the applications, and so that's one of the reasons why we're doing a session today. But just be aware that, you know, it's no guarantee of funding. I know you probably all are, and have applied for lots of pots of funding before. It is a very competitive process. Bearing that in mind, just apply for what you need. We want to fund as many organisations as possible. So you can only apply once for funding. So if you're successful, that is your pot of funding, that's it, you can't reapply. If you're unsuccessful, that is also your only attempt, unfortunately. This is to try and manage some of the demand, and it's sort of an agreement with us and government. Organisations that can apply, it's all on the website, so I won't go through, but it's just the sort of standard, the usual suspects. We can fund partnership applications, but this would count as the lead partner's opportunity to apply. It wouldn't be the same for the delivery partners, they could reapply, but unfortunately the lead partner, it would be their sort of one application. And we know that's not ideal, but that's part of the sort of requirements at the moment with government. Basically, we can sort of skip through a bit of this, but just all I'd say is it's just general usual eligibility criteria. We'll share the slides and you can see it on the website as well. And the only difference to our usual eligibility criteria is that we no longer are funding schools and statutory bodies with this funding. So who we want to fund, I think there's sort of 3 priority groups which we want to fund. This is the first one, which is organisations supporting people and communities who experience disproportionate challenge and difficulty as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. We're very aware, as I'm sure all of you are, about the disproportionate impact that COVID's having on some communities, and so we're prioritising our support to people and communities most affected by the pandemic. I think this includes disabled people, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in particular, but also we will be supporting organisations who are supporting older people. We recognise how important it is to support those families who are living in poverty on lower incomes, who are facing increased hardship, and also working with homeless people and organisations supporting vulnerable children and young people. The second, not sure if that's loaded. So the next one is organisations providing services and support for vulnerable people, for which there'll be increased demand as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So focusing on specific issues which have arisen as a result of COVID-19. I think there's some examples there. For example, organisations providing food and basic essentials to those who are shielding, organisations working to prevent domestic abuse and violence, organisations supporting people and their families with end-of-life care, and organisations who support people experiencing poor mental health and well-being. And those 2 are funded through the government funding, and this final is maybe less relevant for some of you, but is funded through our own funding. It's supporting organisations which connect communities who work together in response to COVID-19. And this is particularly sort of infrastructure support and capacity building. We know how important that role is in the sector, especially during the pandemic when incomes have dropped and we need to potentially think about new income generation, sort of the new data and technology capabilities which are needed. So yeah, we have been funding a few infrastructure organisations, and I would encourage you to utilise your infrastructure organisation. So this is sort of going over what we've already looked at. So we like to encourage applications from organisations that support these groups, and in particular we want to support organisations led by people who have lived experiences of the issues that they're trying to address. So yeah, this one, if your project does work with children, young people, or vulnerable adults, you need to have a proper safeguarding policy in place. So just be aware of that. And you also have to comply with our safeguarding policy. We obviously understand that with COVID-19, there's new ways of working online, there's new volunteers, and you need to make sure that policies, practices, and staff training are all up to date. What you can spend the money on, this again is all on the website. We'll share the slides, so I won't go through it all, but I think the key thing is minimal requirements related to PPE. We can fund PPE, we can't fund it at mass scale generally, but we can sort of fund minimal requirements of PPE, cleaning and adaptations to buildings to meet social distancing standards, to get yourselves ready to reopen if you plan to return to face-to-face contact within the 6-month period.
Yep.
What we can't fund, again, same as ever, so you can see that on the website. What we can't fund is sort of large requests for PPE, and there's cleaning and adaptation to building which are beyond government requirements. Okay, so this is how to apply. You can look at the website for a bit more guidance and information. All applications should go through the website unless you have a specific communication need. Information that you need to apply includes sort of stuff here. Again, we can share this, but contact details for 2 different people from your organisation. So your name, email address, telephone numbers, things like that. Details about your organisation, type of organisation, and then we'll also ask some questions about the actual proposal itself. So there's 6 questions there about how your work will involve the community, how your project fits with local activities, who will benefit from your project, the difference your project will make, how much money you'll need, and what for, and how long do you need the money for. So if you want to go through any of those during the Q&A, yeah, feel free to ask. One thing I would say just on that is, I think the first question about how your work will involve your community, generally the lottery is really focused on this idea of people in the lead, the idea that people who benefit or have a meaningful say in the organisation through consultation or through decision making. We're aware that there's going to be limitations to that during this crisis, and will have been. And so we're not necessarily asking you what consultation have you done for this specific project, but more about what your organisation does in general. Because yeah, we know that it is difficult to do some of those sort of more in-depth, longer-term work around consultation and co-production. So yeah, if your application is eligible, so we'll receive your application if it's eligible and it fits well with our priorities. We'll ask some follow-up questions, which are listed here. These are sort of need a little bit more detail and are through government requirements as well. So yeah, you do ask for a bit about information about how many volunteers, how many staff, and the proposed budget, recent bank statement. We do ask a bit more information about your financial situation, and a cash flow forecast for the next 6 months if you're applying for over 50,000. Once you've had all the information processed, it goes through our decision-making process. It'll be seen by a local team, a national lottery panel, and also it'll be seen by a DCMS panel. Currently the wait time is around 6 weeks. We're trying to go as fast as we can, but we are oversubscribed. We've got a lot of applications, so just try and bear with us, really.
6 weeks.
If you're successful, yeah, so we return your offer letter we'll send you an offer letter which you should return within a week, and you can start your grant within a month of the date on your letter. The full grant amount will be usually made within 1 payment on the week of the start date. In regards to sort of like the monitoring, it's going to be very, very light touch. The government wants an evaluation, but the only sort of information you'll be really asked is how many people you reached, how many volunteers you worked with, what you did, and what difference the funding has made. So it'll be fairly light touch. So yeah, if you want any more information, we'll ask in the Q&A section. but also there is the link to our website. We've got an advice line as well, and if you want to contact us directly in the Northwest, there's an email address there too. So yeah, any questions? I'm not sure if there's been any during the presentation, but I think Joe's going to sort of coordinate.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. A lot of information to get through there, but it is all, a lot of it sits on the website. But now it's over to you. You know, what questions have you got regarding this? Does anyone want to go first? There isn't anything in the chat at the moment, so I'm assuming that people might just want to unmute their microphones and just ask a good question.
I'll start if no one else wants to. It's Tanya. I work mainly for foundations. It's a charitable community benefit society. We run a number of food pantries in Stockport. We've had to close 2 of them in particular due to the lockdown at the moment because they're too small to be able to safely socially distance with people coming to visit. So the idea of the pantries is that they're an alternative to food banks. So people come and visit, they become a member, and then for £3.50 a week they can choose a selection of food. At the moment we're obviously having to do pre-packed bags for safety reasons. But the bid that we're considering for this fund, and I'd appreciate your advice on whether it's appropriate, is that at the moment it's operating from a former caretaker's broom cupboard, and it's really very small, and it's impossible for the volunteers to operate safely and for people to come safely to visit and collect a bag. So what we're looking to do is to knock it through into an unused space next door, and to be able to make it a much larger space where we could safely allow people to come in during the COVID situation, but also we'd add an element of a working wardrobe into it, because there's not really a facility locally for to provide any kind of smart clothing for unemployed men in the local area, and we anticipate that the number of those people is going to increase quite significantly as the furlough scheme comes to an end. So we're wanting to find a little bit more out from you as to whether that's the kind of scheme that you'd consider funding, particularly the expansion of the pantry into a larger space to enable us to operate safely for local people.
Thanks for that, Tanya. As I said in the presentation, we will fund sort of reasonable adjustments to space in order to try and make it more fit for purpose during this crisis, so that it fits within guidelines. So I think it's about how realistic it is in regards to timescales. So if it's sort of a fairly short-term piece of work to get that done, then that makes a lot of sense. If it's going to take a lot of time, and then within that timescale we don't really know what the social distancing guidelines are, that's obviously where there would maybe be a bit more challenge about whether this is appropriate right now. But I think in general, if this is something which can be done quite quickly, and it's something which is really needed, then I think it would be eligible to apply, and something that we would look at. So yeah, obviously there are no guarantees with this, but
of course.
But I think you could definitely put in an application.
Right, brilliant. Thanks for your help. Thanks, Caleb.
Hi, nice question. So I'm Amanda from Pure. I suppose my question is around where does it matter where the funding originally should come from? So we deliver day services for people with complex learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and our buildings at the moment do not permit us to bring all our clients back. So we have 250 people in Stockport, and at the moment we're only able to run probably about 60% of our business. The funding normally comes from Stockport Council, but via people's personal budgets. That's going to obviously cause us some financial difficulties, probably over the next 6 months while we're trying to acquire new space, new property and so on. Is that something that we can fund, even though it should have been funded by Stockport Council, but obviously they can't do because it's people's personal budgets?
It becomes a slight grey area, but when it comes to these sorts of where the funding came from previously, I'd have to look at it in the specific case, but as far as I'm aware, you could still fund in regards to if the organisation being under financial pressure.. If it's you're asking for us to fund the actual your organisation who are struggling to survive, then I think they'd be much more likely to fund. If you're asking us to basically replace the funding to continue delivering what Stockport Council should be funding, then I think there'd be more problems with it.
Yeah, I think our ideal would be to kind of get some funding to be able to rent additional property, so we've got the space to then deliver, and then Stockport funding will come for the learners, but the rent is the addition that we've not had to pay before, which is the bit that's causing financial difficulty.
Yeah, so from what you've said, I think that would be something which we could potentially fund. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I jump in, please? This is it's Wayne from Mode Rehabilitation.
Hi, Wayne.
I haven't got my camera on because I look a mess, but I'm in a room where I shouldn't be. So, two elements to my question. First one, very quick. Right at the very beginning, I missed what you said about submission of applications. That only one can be made at a time. Now, if you've made an application and that has been unsuccessful, are you then permitted to reapply again? I wasn't quite sure on how that was being explained.
No, so if you can only have one application per organisation. If you're unsuccessful, then you can't reapply for funding. It's part of the government requirements with this funded programme. So normally with our Reaching Communities programme, you can just keep reapplying if you wanted to, but this is part of the government. It's government funding which we're distributing, and it's only one application per organisation. Partly, I think, to manage the demand because so many organisations are applying. Right.
Okay. So the second element to my question, this may tie in with a couple of things that people have already said. Mode Rehabilitation in the unusual position, apart from on the brink of closing down because no money coming through. But additionally, we actually have a building. I don't live up there, remember, I'm living down south. It's called the Rat Pit in Stockport. So there may be something between us, different organisations, that could actually look at being able to use that building to facilitate something for everyone if people are stuck and can't get grant monies and so on and so on. The end of the day is that there's a building sat there, we should be utilising it. We want to look at utilising it now for things like food banks and clothes, but also where the kids that we look after can come in and get some one-on-one face-to-face counselling. At the moment, all our counselling is being done online, which isn't ideal. In order to counsel these children properly, you need to have that face-to-face contact properly, see the body language and understand everything. So I would be grateful if there's any support can be given to us, because we are now desperate. Our reserves have gone. Our income that used to come in from the schools for the children that we support is no longer being paid because the schools are shut down, but yet we still have over 250 children that we're supporting, and some of them are from the NEN concept. I've got PTSD, depression and stuff like that. We are absolutely at a situation, and I've got a discussion tomorrow with the local MP. We are in a situation where we don't get income coming in soon, then we will be closing down. There's nothing else we can do. So I'm here today saying desperately, what on earth can we do to help us here and now?
Thanks, Wayne. We've had a conversation recently, haven't we, about what we can do to
We have.
I think, Kaylin, Mode have actually, they did put in a bid, and we're unclear as to whether they bid into this fund or they got it in just before the government funding landed. So I think an action to take offline is just, could we get some clarity on that, just so we know whether Wayne's in a position to put resubmit a bid. So we can discuss that offline, obviously. But if there's anything else you want to add, Kaylin?
No, yeah, we can discuss that offline. If I'm not sure about the specifics of the.
No.
So
yeah.
we'll,
But the thing is still there about the building. If there's somebody else online that thinks, actually, that's not far from where we are, okay, and maybe there's something we could do, then,
right,
why not? It helps each other, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, Wayne, and we can put something in the Sector 3 bulletin on Friday. If you've got a kind of request for collaboration, we can put that in there and make sure it goes out to the wider network.
Right.
Is that all right? If you want to send something to me.
Okay, that'd be great.
Just related to that question, I think, is Andrew, he's put it on the chat, about would bidding and being successful or unsuccessful affect any other lottery funding, such as the regular, I suppose, the kind of mainstream reaching communities?
No, so people who already have reaching communities funding, they can still apply. This, at the moment, really the only thing that you can apply for is this funding. So, and we have funding loads of organisations who are already funded by us, who are not funded by us, and we don't anticipate that it will affect future funding decisions at all.
Great. So, so if you're an organisation that already had it in your pipeline to put in a Reaching Communities Fund bid in, say, September of this year, but obviously the crisis has dealt you a blow, so you've had to go in for the COVID response stuff, you're still eligible to go in for a Reaching Communities one when your mainstream comes back online, yeah? Yeah, so as I've said previously in the presentation, we're not 100% on what that looks like, that funding, which post-COVID, because I think that we're still working on that. So it's not, most reaching communities was paused around March or April, and so we're not 100% sure about what comes back, but there will be funding and there will be a funding programme and it will be open, and so at that point you can reapply for that funding, but I can't tell you exactly what that funding looks like. No, great, thank you. Sean, do you want to ask your question? You've put something on chat. Sean's asked around, he runs a community radio station, Your FM, and we've used money we've been saving up for a replacement transmitter to meet urgent revenue needs during COVID. So they've had to, reprofile the money and use it elsewhere. Could they apply for funding for a transmitter and additional equipment to allow more volunteers to broadcast from home? So it's a transmitter. So that's now not working or something. Yeah, it's something that they were looking to. I don't know if Sean's available to speak, but I think it's about, as I've said, there's in the presentation you can have a look, and there are priority sort of groups which we're looking to target, and so I think all projects need to fit within those sorts of priority groups. So this is an emergency fund which is trying to get support for people who need it most, but we understand that is the type of delivery and type of support is really varied for that, and they could, that doesn't just fit certain things, and so radio and media and things, those are still important, but it would need to really clearly identify how that is supporting communities to respond to this crisis. It needs to be COVID focused, it needs to have that clear impact. So until I could see the actual proposal and who it's targeting, and then it's hard for me to say, but yeah, don't know if there's anything to add, Georgie.
So I noticed in Sean's question he put at the end about sort of funding sessional workers as well. Those are the sort of things that we can fund in terms of like salary costs or sessional worker costs as well. But yeah, kind of what sort of Kaelan said, it has to fit into that sort of the wider priorities context in relation to COVID, and if it's sort of, if you're working with like the priority groups and it's an immediate response to the crisis as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Sorry, just one quick one. Because you can only apply once, is there a difference between the under 10,000 and the over 10,000, or is it one just across the board?
No, it's one fund across the board. So whether you put in an application for under £10,000 or over £10,000, it is just the one application.
Okay. And nice to meet you, Georgie. Thank you.
To meet you too.
Can I just ask, I'm Michelle Conway, I run Kira's Kingdom. I've put a funding bid in 3 weeks ago for the under 10,000 for a walk and talk with the people. We've already actually started it because people's mental health was really badly declining. Sorry, I was a bit late joining the video. I was just wondering what the wait time is on a response back from the application.
So me and Georgie work on the team, which is work on applications above 10,000. So I can't give you
Right.
I'll give you exact. All I know, but I can try and find out, and then that can be shared by Joe. At the moment, Awards for All, which it's not Awards for All, but it's the under 10,000. So what would previously be seen as Awards for All, that is even more oversubscribed than the above 10,000. So I think they're pretty inundated. So generally, the response time, I think, would be looking to a quite a similar situation to us, so month to 6 weeks probably. But I think it's very busy right now, so I don't want to give you a specific time scale. There is an advice line which you can call up and ask specifically how long they think it's going to be, and they might be able to help you out. But yeah, I can speak with Joe and see if we've got any sort of idea. I'll pass on any sort of ideas that I get about how long it will be in general, but I won't be able to review a project.
All right, thank you.
I am Andrew from H3. It was a quick question about the timings. You mentioned it's got to be spent 6 months from when it's awarded. But if you don't know when this is closing or roughly how long that's taking, we currently have a homeless health project that's going to come to an end. But there's obviously, as you can imagine, going to be a huge demand on GPs and frontline health services by the homeless people that are coming out of all the temporary COVID accommodation. So we'd like to plan that, but I suppose it's a question of how could you knowingly stagger it? Because if we didn't need that money, say this month or next month, but in 6-8 weeks' time, it's just a question of planning for that 6 month period if we can't pin it down to an exact period, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the only flexibility we can sort of really give is that from when we award, you've got a month to start, and then it's 6 months from whenever you decide to start. So
it's sort of a 7 month period in theory, but like a time frame. Brilliant.
In theory, but also bear in mind that I wouldn't wait. If you think that you need the money in say 2 to 3 months, then bear in mind that it's taken 6 weeks to 2 months potentially to get through at times. If there is any hold up, for example, if you haven't filled in any of the information correctly, that can hold stuff up as well. So I would consider that it's going to take sort of 6 weeks to 2 months, and then you've got 1 month after that to play around with if you need it.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, we understand it's really difficult for organisations that are planning. We understand this is sort of emergency funding, so we want it spent, but we understand there's also organisations who will have these sort of funding gaps and it doesn't really quite work for them. So we will try and be flexible if we can.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Rachel from the Cherry Tree Project. My question was similar, which I thought I would kind of jump in with. Do we have any idea yet when the COVID funding will end? And if and when it does, will it automatically go back to being the fund that you had previously?
So we don't know when it's going to end yet, but it's just like a lump sum from government, which is getting spent, and we are sort of looking at it and monitoring it. And when we think it's reasonable to close it, we'll close it. And we will give a bit of notice to the sector, and so you'll hopefully see newsletters from Sector3 and Joe, and so hopefully you will get a bit of notice. But at the moment, I can't give you any sort of specifics on that. All I'd say is if you need to apply, then apply post COVID funding. I can't sort of say anything for definite, but there definitely will be a lot of funding. Once this funding's over, it's just what that looks like. When exactly that returns, whether there's a crossover period or whether there's a slight break, I'm not sure. Sort of but there will be funding for the remainder of.
Well, that's helpful. Reason for my question is we've been planning to open a community cafe for a while. and it looks like that will happen before the end of this year. We've never applied for funding with you before because it's quite a big part. We've saved it knowing that actually you would be the person the best organisation to kind of fund the bigger project. But we're currently running a online cooking project weekly now. We've got 100 families a week, and that's costing us £500 a week. So we do need funding for that. But if I have to pick, the other one's a priority. So I was wondering whether I can apply for this now, and then in a couple of months' time, when things switch back, we can apply for funding for the cafe then. It's just with guessing timing, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should be saving pots of funding, and if you need funding, you need it. If this is what's necessary to have the biggest impact when it's necessary, then apply for it. It's one pot of funding. When the other pots of funding open, you will be able to apply for it. There's nothing that I've been told which would show that any organisation applies this would be then.
Well,
yeah. Sorry, Kaylin, your audio is just dropping in and out. I think I don't know whether there's an issue there, but I think, yeah, absolutely, Rachel. I think you should be going for this pot of funding for your existing COVID response stuff, with a view to putting in a Reaching Communities fund later on down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I want to do.
Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah.
And it won't affect you at all. No, absolutely not.
Brilliant.
Go for it, Rach.
See you later. Yeah. Thank you.
Go for it. What more from Stockport? Woo!
Yeah. So, can I ask something, Joe? I just wanted to know it's Simone from the Goodness Collective, and also supporting some work with Sector 3. I just wanted to know if you could give us a steer on what sort of projects are securing the funds. Does it tend to be mainly now around the emergency response, around food, medicine, or has it moved on a little bit to mental health and things like that? I know you said you've got specific people that you're trying to target and potentially vulnerable areas, but are there certain projects that are standing out as being approved?
I mean, I think it's a broad range, and I think Georgie can probably come in and know a bit more because she works a lot with organisations on a day-to-day basis with their applications. But speaking from my perspective, it feels like we're funding a wide variety. I think it's those things which we spoke about. There is a lot in there. I think, when it comes to food, when it comes to sort of social isolation, mental health, refugee and asylum seekers, homelessness, domestic violence, we are funding projects which cover all these areas. So I wouldn't say there is anything particular which is coming up all the time. I think food poverty is obviously a big one, has been a big one, and loneliness, and trying to sort of support people through trying to reduce that sort of isolation has come through. But it's changing all the time as the crisis changes, and I think we need to change how we fund and what we prioritise with that. I don't know if Georgie, you want to add anything to that?
No, yeah, I think you're spot on, Kaylin. Like it is a really wide variety of projects that we're seeing across sort of all areas that we cover. Obviously, we do have like organisations and sort of groups that we do want to sort of prioritise, and obviously everything needs to be sort of COVID focused. But yeah, definitely now that the restrictions are starting to ease and things are sort of slowly getting back to normality, things are changing, and I suppose they have been changing sort of since the beginning of the pandemic, because like I said, those restrictions have slowly started to be pushed back a little bit, so projects are also evolving with them as well.
I think, am I right in thinking that there'll be some comms coming out around successful bids soon from the lottery? I think Mandy mentioned it on Friday, so people will start to see kind of what's been successful as well.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if that's been finalised yet, but yeah, I think there will be some comms coming out to sort of show how much funding's gone out so far. So hopefully that should have some sort of good information for people.
Great.
Great, thank you. Just the only follow-up to that really is if people in the communities are finding actually there are problems that maybe are not seen as a priority on the list, are you asking for kind of evidence from them that this is what we're finding in order to say that this is a priority locally?
Yeah, if you feel like there's real big issues which you don't think we're focusing on or haven't highlighted, and then absolutely let us know. I think what we want to do locally in general is try and have that sort of wider picture anyway, and try and speak to people like Joe about what's going on locally. And so if there are sort of particular issues where you think actually we need to be focused on that, then hopefully we should be able to speak to Joe and speak to other people to try and see if that's the case, and that's their understanding as well. So yeah, I would always say with these things, you look at the parameters with which we've sort of set them, but if you feel like there's things outside of that which are really important in your local area, then please let us know.
Yeah, if I can help influence things as they progress on your behalf, then just send me your ideas and thoughts, then I can feed that through. I'm meeting quite regularly with the lottery team now. I mean, we've all sort of learning a lot from this. It's all kind of landed on us quite, you know, it's been a crisis at the end of the day, so it's been a kind of like, let's just try and do what the best that we can. But granted that some people may, you know, you on the front line are the ones that know what's needed. So for me, the voices of the front line need to come to the fore, and if they can come through to me, I can then pass that information back and that intelligence of what's happening on the ground, and we can try and influence any further iterations of the fund if necessary. The lottery have been really good and open, and they really want to listen. So we've got that mechanism now in Stockport to do that, to give that feedback. So.
Hiya, Solomon from Pyrid and Rising Stars. I came a bit late to the meeting. I wanted to ask, could we apply to do like some structural work with the funding? So say make some changes to like our building space to make it a bit more sort of repurpose the use. I don't know if that makes any sense, or are you only paying for like delivery cost, or what kind of things could we apply for?
Yeah, so in the presentation, there's a bit of information about that. So I think Joe's going to share the presentation, but we can fund adaptations to your sort of space to make it fit government requirements, as long as it is sort of, it feels reasonable and is sort of within that sort of government guidelines and not sort of above and beyond. So yeah, we can fund adaptations to your building.
Okay.
Organisations, we can also sort of fund organisation costs as well. It doesn't all have to be project delivery.
Right, okay, so the kind of things I'm thinking of, like maybe like air conditioning, just because it gets really hot because it's summertime now. So kind of, obviously I'm underwater because I'm trying to stay cool. So, you know, finding a way to kind of make the make the room itself kind of cool and conducive for people when they come in. So with things like that be acceptable, I guess, yeah.
It has to be responsive to the COVID crisis. So if what you're asking for is in relation to the COVID crisis and that you want to try and create more space or whatever, but if it's air conditioning for a building and it's not, it's just to make the building just a better place to work, and we completely understand that that's something that you'd want to do and something which would potentially fit our funding generally, but not a COVID response funding.
Right, okay, thank you.
I have a question if there's still time, please.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name's Ellie. I'm from Greater Manchester Doulas, and Kaylin is our funding manager. So it's nice to meet you, Kaylin. I emailed to ask you because we did receive the COVID version of reaching communities, and we've burned through that. The demand that we expected has been, the need for our services was higher than we ever really could have imagined. And while I've been on this call, I've been researching how to apply for this. Should we, if we have had the money from reaching communities and we have almost already spent it, is that something that we should be talking about in our application because it speaks to the demand for the services, or does it just make us look bad for not having asked for enough money in the first place?
No, if you've had a previous application and you're feeling like you're spending all that money and you're under financial pressure to meet the demand, then yeah, I think what I'd always encourage is openness with us. We understand the situation, so once we understand situation, we can sort of make decisions based on that. So yeah, I would not hold back if there is specific funding needs which are needed because of described, and that's something that you should let us know about.
Okay, thank you.
Just wondering whether it's worth raising the point around that it's not lottery money, it's government money. Yeah. So I would encourage those organisations that wouldn't normally apply for lottery money to go for it, because it's not linked to the lottery is the administrator, I guess, and the fund manager. It's not actually lottery money. So it may be that certain organisations culturally wouldn't like to go for lottery money, but this one isn't lottery money, it's government money, so please do go for it. And that point around this fund around liquidity, you know, you're very keen on supporting organisations that maybe are eating through reserves because they've seen a drop in income but a demand has risen. So whereas ordinarily be looking for healthy reserves to manage the risk of giving grants out, if you're going through your reserves, then it won't go against you if you haven't got the reserves that you would normally have. I think is right to say, Kaylin.
Yeah, without doubt. And you know, if you're in a situation where you're eating for your reserves at quite a dangerous rate, then we will consider applications which will top up reserves back to, say, sort of a 3-month level, if that's what they were at, or if they're above that before COVID. So we are willing to do that. I think there's some limitations with our website in that when you're filling in the information, it's all about what will be the impact, what's how are people involved, and it's also project focused. When actually, if your organisation is just struggling financially because it's a difficult situation, and for all the reasons why you could be struggling, that's also fine. And we want to support organisations. I think that's a big priority for us, because we don't want to have a situation where this finishes and we've lost key organisations in Stockport. So if you're feeling like you're struggling, but actually this doesn't feel like it fits in regards to project delivery, or you can't even deliver at all really, but you still need funding for your core organisation to keep yourselves going, then you can apply.
Mm. Yes, yeah, so you don't have to be creating a new project under this. It can, you know, like Kaylin said, fund us through this really difficult time. Any more questions, Solomon?
Yes, so I was going to ask, can you do a joint application? So obviously I work directly with Rising Stars, which is a youth-led organization, but then also work with Pyre Radio, which is like a separate organization on its own as well. Why is Vicky laughing? Laughing at my water. So yes, I was going to say, can you do a joint application, or can they just put in 2 individual applications, or what's the best way of doing it?
Was this specifically around combining the Heritage Emergency Fund and this one?
No, so the Heritage is through Rising Stars. We have a current Heritage project that we're running right now. So obviously I'm speaking to the team on that side, and they were saying that we could potentially put in to support some of like the building changes that we wanted to make. But then with the community fund, I wanted to go more for like project based to kind of run the COVID thing. So I wanted to find out whether should I combine them or do it as separate applications, and I wasn't quite sure what the best way is of doing it.
So on the partnerships question, you can apply it as a partnership. Usual rules apply about there being clear rationale for why you're doing it. But yeah, you can apply as a partnership. I mentioned in the presentation that you can only apply once. If you're the lead partner, because there's always a lead partner when people apply for our funding, then that is your one application, so you can't reapply after that. The other partners can reapply, so that's just like a slight annoyance, because we understand that that's a bit frustrating, but that's the sort of situation. With the Heritage Fund stuff, they're sort of separate, so you can treat them as such. It's not like a combined application. and you can apply for heritage and for this funding. As I've said, this and as Joe has said, this isn't lottery funding really. This is government funding anyway. So if it feels like, if we get an application that feels like this actually doesn't make sense for us, it's definitely a heritage project, then we might push back and say, actually, you should apply for heritage. This doesn't really fit with us. But you can technically apply for both funds, or for any of the sort of lottery funds.
All right, thank you very much.
Kind of going to the last 7 minutes now. So any questions or areas of clarification for anyone? If you're not happy to speak, you can just pop it in the chat, and I shall speak on your behalf. No.
Hand up from Simone.
I've got another one, Joe, and this is obviously more for other people than for me. So I work with quite a lot of community groups and things who have, they've been kind of funding what they do in the community with their paid job. But obviously now that has gone, in terms of constitution and stuff, it's all on your website that they can go to and look at that. But is there any stuff around, I don't suppose there is, I'm answering my own question here, so like around their living costs and things that they would have had through the paid job, because now they can't do that and they're struggling to run the community? It would be about trying to refocus and show what they need to support the community, wouldn't it?
I'm not sure I'm 100% clear, sorry.
No, I'm not sure I'm 100% clear. I'm just sorting something out in my head. I'm just thinking, so a lot of the community groups that we support, they often they don't do it full time, so they work, but during obviously the crisis there has been something around them being furloughed or losing jobs, so their income that allows them to do the community work has been lost basically. So they would have to really create a sessional role, wouldn't they, within their community and pay themselves that way? So they could put a sessional role, I suppose is my question forward, as...
He's asking if a new role could be created.
Yeah.
So
I just know a lot of people do it for free, but they've had jobs in the past to be able to allow them to do that for free, and that's changing for some people.
So I think it's slightly complicated by the furlough scheme. So if they are people who've been furloughed, so they're currently receiving 80% of their income from government, then they wouldn't be able to be paid by us because this is government funding. So they couldn't then take on a new job within your organisation because then it would be sort of double funding.
Yeah, of course. But if they had lost the job, I suppose the sessional thing would be the way around that. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you.
But if they've lost their job not for the community organisation, for their other role, you can still apply for, sessional workers or for new posts if you wanted to. So if you can apply for new positions and people can take up those positions. So if they want to change the role and focus on full-time work for your charity or community organisation, then you can apply for a new role. Obviously, there has to be a degree of sort of openness in the recruitment process. So it's not as easy as just someone just takes a job, but it's a lot more relaxed than it would have been previously.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers what I think I was trying to ask.
Great, thank you. Anybody else before we go? 4 minutes. No, I hope that was helpful for everyone. I thank Georgie and Kaylin for coming today and being part of this. Like I say, I really want to see Stockport be able to leverage in money for their organisations through the lottery, because it's really important what we do in our sector, and we want to see everyone survive this crisis. And the lottery fund is a great one to enable you to do that. I don't want there to be any barriers in your way for you to apply. So Sector 3 is here, like I said. Stockport Homes are here, Mark Rogers and his funding officer capacity, and we've got Thad from Stockport Local Fund. So I just really want you to know that we're here. We can't write bids for you because the lottery will tell a mile off, and you know your organisation is better than we do, but certainly we can be a critical friend. We can look over applications and give some feedback, and the offer is there. So please do get in touch. This has been recorded, so if there's some people that you know in your network that perhaps couldn't get a ticket today, if you ask them to email me, I can send them a recording on WeTransfer. We'll also be putting it on the Sector 3 YouTube channel for people to watch at your leisure if there's anything you want to reflect back